Anybody want to share a success story? Tonight, we're going to talk about strength finders and how it relates to building your value proposition. Question, just a show of hands, how many people have been here for all the sessions? Okay. We have given you an accumulation of information that hopefully in the next 2 meetings, the value proposition, the brand, and the resume, that you'll have enough information to start penciling in what it is you think you offer an employer. These sessions, as I think about it, each of the sessions could stand by themselves, and so that tonight, if this is the only session one would come, they'd learn a little bit about strength finders. But in the scheme of the bigger story, how does that all tie in? That's what we're going to try doing tonight. I will say this as I take a look at the first couple sessions. When we did the exercises here on values and interests, we'll be handling those sessions. I also might mention tonight, I had mentioned earlier that some people from our parish would also be here tonight to help support us, and we ran into a scheduling glitch. So fortunately, we have done this for a number of years, and I believe that we will more than adequately cover the bases tonight in talking about strength finders. I know this is repetitious, but I want to just keep reminding, because this is somewhat new to you. Over the last 2 months, you probably haven't thought about your value proposition, so I'm going to repeat again, just to bring this back. The values and priorities, we looked at 3 categories: critical, somewhat important, and least important. And I asked you to focus in on the critical values. Remember, I said those are non-negotiable. And there's a sheet at the end of that session where you could write in those 4 values. If you are anticipating success and happiness in a job, and that job aligns with those 4 values, you'll feel good. And I'm not talking about your skills to do the work, but those values, if they align with the work that you're doing, I believe you'll feel good in your next job. Motivators and demotivators, we focus mostly on motivators, and I asked you to reflect back over the last 2 or 3 jobs and think of the company, think of the boss, think of the work environment, and if you add all of that up, what were the best of the motivators that made you feel good coming to work? As you are interviewing, invariably, the interviewer is going to say, "So Charlie, do you have any questions?" And one of your questions might be, "So tell me a little bit about what the culture's like. What does it feel like to work here? What motivates people to get up in their car?" You've heard me say this before. Get in the car, go to work, and anticipate having fun that day. What you're really asking is, what is the culture? Am I going to be motivated to work here? So as you go through the interview process, a question like that can come back and validate your motivators. And by the way, as you interview, obviously you interview with the boss, but then you also interview with the boss's boss, and sometimes you might interview with 1 or 2 other people in a second interview. So you can validate some of the information that you're hearing.
Can I ask?
You sure can.
Okay, good. In an interview, is it appropriate to ask about the age of the people that work there, like the employees? The reason I ask is
Go ahead.
because with my job, I'm old enough to be their fathers. Everyone there is in the 20s,
Right.
just barely out of high school. I'm in my 50s,
Right.
and that's, if you're in an interview.
So what's the significance of that, Mike, to you?
There's like a 30-year age gap.
So what?
And it's harder to be in the same, mental capacity as they are, because they're thinking of a different mindset than you are,
So
because you're in a different generation.
I probably would coach you to stay away from that question. For one thing, an interviewer doesn't want to get involved in age because then the chances of discrimination surface. What I think that you would hear would be that if you have identified the right competencies and the person can perform those competencies, then age should not make a difference. And this is just the reverse. He's talking about a young person, but there's some people in here that have the color of my hair who say, I've got those competencies and they won't hire me because I'm too old. And it's the same argument. If we've got the competencies to do a job, then an employer needs to explore that, whether they're 21 or 30 or 51. So, I mean, that might be the reality of the type of work that you do and the type of people that you hire. So it really is important. You talk about competencies and the culture. Here's what it's like to work here at the moment. Okay? Maybe not quite what you wanted to hear.
No, that's all right.
Okay. Achieving life balance. This is a crossroads, and you know, stick to your guns. If in fact work and life have been out of balance, you know, try to find a way to compromise and put life and work back in balance. It is truly important. It's not easy. I think a lot of employers today, they make you feel like they own you, so to speak, in your work schedule, but it can be done. It's just a matter of looking for the right job. I met somebody this week who started in consulting and then worked 17 years for a well-known company. And the gist of what I heard was that maybe I should retire, but then maybe I want to go back into consulting. Net, she did not want to travel down into Chicago anymore. And so she's trying to put her work and life back into balance. And that's, remember get down to the needs, in fact that's the next one. When you filled out that last sheet in the first session on needs, in the right column there was something about relocation. You know, one of her strong needs is, I'm not going to commute into Chicago anymore. What was interesting to that, later on, I said, so tell me what's going on in your job search right now. She says, I have a job offer. Oh, you do? And where is it? Downtown Chicago, right across from Union Station. And I said, well, you really have to ask yourself how strongly you feel about that, because if you want to work anywhere in Chicago, it isn't going to get any better than that. Get off the train, walk across the street and into the building and go to work. So pay attention to that, because again, work can get out of kilter, and it can ruin the way we look at the world, our attitudes and our relationships with others. Keeping good balance also gives us better energy. We went into the Myers-Briggs type. The E or the, we talked about preferences, the E or the I, extroversion or introversion. Where do you get your energy from? And for those that are E's, I encourage you to look for jobs where you're around people and a lot of action. If you are an I, introversion, you look for jobs that allow you, give you space to think through complex problems and come up with solutions. You can't do that with people screaming around you. So there's a way of looking at a job through the E lens or the I lens. The S or the N preference. The S is a person who works very well with facts. Very well with facts. If you're in accounting, or if you're in technology, and you were an S, that preference of yours and your personality would fit well. The N, on the other hand, is somebody, you use Covey, you start with the end in mind and then work your way back. And that might be somebody who's more into future planning. We get into the T or F, that was how we make decisions. The T's are very objective, do a lot of analysis, and make very objective decisions. Let me tell you, if you're in the field of medicine or any of the professions, you know, I happen to, Kathy is a T and I happen to be an F. Kathy's in healthcare, which is good for me. She makes very objective decisions on my healthcare, but I usually say to people, I make decisions in F, kind of value motivated. You know, it just feels right that we got to do it this way, this time. There's not a lot of objective analysis in it. But I will tell you that I want my doctor, my dentist, my lawyer, my stockbroker, anybody who's going to make a decision on me, I want you all to be strong T's if I'm going to you for advice. So some of the types of work require a lot of analysis in the decision making versus the F. And the J and the P is really how we like to live our life. We heard a little story on that tonight. The J's are very organized. They love lists, and they like calendars and schedules and work to do, which is my wife. And Kathy is the J, and I'm the P. And so I kind of go with the flow every day. Tomorrow's a new day. You know, yesterday is history. And in both of those preferences, the J they work well with each other. And a little bit of what you said also to bring out, we learn from each other. And so that I as a P, I learn from Kathy who's a J. And I think Kathy as a J learns a little bit from me when I am kind of going with the flow. I'll do it next Tuesday. That all plays out over time and over life. And so it's good who we are, but it's also good to surround us with people who are different than us, because we learn from each other. That was the Myers-Briggs. I didn't talk about jobs there, but there were a number of handouts that give you some ideas of jobs. And then we went into accomplishments and competencies last time. The accomplishment is a statement on your resume underneath the job title. And the accomplishment is proof that you can do that job. And we got off of that real quick. We'll let Dan talk more about that when he talks about the resume. But I also mentioned to you that in every accomplishment, there's a competency. It's a noun or a verb. And you need to have that in hand to do that responsibility. Noun or a verb. And so that we talked about that both from a resume point of view and accomplishment. We also talked about it from a job posting point of view. So that as you're looking at job postings, and you look at the primary responsibilities, take a highlighter and look at every one of those primary responsibilities and highlight the nouns and verbs. So the idea of competencies, and we're going to talk about competencies again tonight. Part of your homework, as we left, was a sheet where I asked you to list your top 5 competencies. Anybody recall that? Right there. Remember me handing that sheet out to you and asking you to fill out those competencies. This sheet, you know, if you want to follow through to the end and build your value proposition, you do need to identify your competencies. It's the last session. It was the last piece of paper I handed out and asked you to, whatever your competencies were from all the research, looking at your resume, you know, what are the most important competencies you believe that you are marketing to another employer? You will have some difficulty finishing this up if you don't go back and do this. But I also mentioned to you another reason why it's important to understand competencies. Certainly it builds the value proposition. It will be very important that your competencies are identified during the job interview. And how do they do that? It's something called behavioral interview. Anybody ever hear of behavioral interviewing? So tell me about a time when, whatever it is, they're going after a story that features that competency that they're looking for. So please don't run away from the concept of competencies, because it's with you throughout this job search. So, did anybody complete their competencies sheet? Okay. I'm gonna proceed through the evening as if you did. And just listen closely so that when you go home, review and identify your competencies so that it fits better into tonight's presentation. Everybody have that sheet?
Okay, so last one here.
No, it's a sheet, I'm sorry. It's a sheet that I showed you.
Right there, yeah.
It's this sheet right here.
Yeah.
It's the last sheet in the presentation. I don't have any extra copies of last week's presentation. Sure, sure.
Like to make copies and we're going to get tomorrow? This.
Maybe you can clutch her a little bit.
Sure.
Good, thank
Will help me.
So this is the map we've been looking at. Tonight we're going to focus on strengths based on what we just went through. I don't know how many of you read the first chapters in the book that before you start identifying what your themes are. But I took a couple quotes off the book from Tom Rapp. He believes that it's six times likely to be people who focus on their strengths, are 6 times likely to be engaged in their job. People who focus on their strengths will be 6 times likely to be engaged in their job, and 3 times likely to report having an excellent quality of life in general. Pretty powerful statement. And did you understand what they put together here? A lot of research has gone into the concept of Strengths Finder. So I thought those validate why I want to learn more about what my strengths are.
It was interesting because there's one quote in there where he talks about looking at kids' grades in school. And, you know, we focus on trying to get their bad grades up instead of trying to focus on where their strengths are. And so I was looking at my son, and, you know, we're harping on him to get his literature grade up. And I'm like, well, maybe we keep harping on him on his art class instead. But, you know, as a parent, you're still like, well, he's got to earn a living someday, and trying to balance that.
I might have a quote in here on that, but what they're saying is it's better to focus more on your strengths than spend too much trying to redevelop your weaknesses. If I could just use that example, what was get his grades up at where?
Literature.
In literature versus the grades up in art or history. You know, each individually, we all gravitate towards what we're comfortable with, our sweet spot. And that's what he is saying. He says, well, if there's an inclination, now, if that literature is a requirement, that's another conversation. But if it's a choice between the two, you know, he's encouraging us to gravitate towards that which aligns best with our strengths. So it's an interesting concept. I had to read that a couple times just to get that into my brain to understand it, but it makes sense. Thank you. I think this is also interesting. How do they come up with the questions to identify talents? They indicate that it takes 20 seconds. 20-second answers reflect dominant patterns in making daily decisions. 20-second decisions. These are very tiny choices and quick reactions. Oh, there are some decisions that take 4 hours or buying a car a couple days. But when you look at decisions, many times we make decisions, judgments, decision in 20 seconds. That's what they say is an average. They also then correlate that to 1,000 decisions a day. And if there are 240 working days, each of us are making about 240,000 work-related decisions every year. And so what they are, these spontaneous reactions, how we answer their questions, reveal our talent themes. Again, maybe that's more than we need to know, but you know, that is their thinking. It isn't just a question off the wall, so to speak. It really delves into one's decision-making process to come up with the themes. Pretty interesting. And I'm not going to take any time right now, but if you just sit here and think about all the decisions you made today, you know, I bet it's more than one. You know, which way am I going to drive home? What are we going to have to eat tonight? Blah, 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 blah. Here's what you were talking about. We cannot be anything we want to be, but we can be a lot more of who we already are. And that's where we find our greatest potential for success. And that's really what this whole value proposition is about. Is, you know, where are our strengths? If we capitalize on our strengths, and I'm going to, right now in the book, let me back up a little bit. Right now in my conversation with you, we're talking about themes. Tonight I'm going to convert the themes into strengths. And before the evening is over, I'm going to say, I think we can look at a strength as a competency. I'll get you there as we talk. But if we can focus on that, we have a greater potential for success. So here's a little bit of what I just mentioned. Strength Finders measures a talent, not a strength. Measures a talent. So there were 34 talents, and at this point in time, you may not recognize those talents as strengths. And I'll explain a little bit to you about that. The feedback that you got did identify your top 5 talents. And your ultimate goal is to ask yourself and discover, are these true strengths? You know, we'll talk a little bit about how you make that judgment about being a true strength. You know, I wish somebody would remind me. I've got some handouts. But the good news is I haven't gotten there yet. More here too. Okay.
Is it the same one or a different one?
No, I didn't hand these out yet tonight.
I'm sorry for being so late. I started to take one of the tests and I...
Well, when you came in, I said, do I owe her a handout? I said, I didn't give anybody a handout. John Prof, that's John's. John Jennings.
There's a lot of friends.
He's slacking.
What did I do?
Give me the attendance.
Attendance?
Are you attending?
Yeah, no, I'm a,
5 themes. Second section talks about the application. What are some action ideas that you can do with these themes? And these first 2 are really good reading. I had 25.
Who needs one?
Who didn't get one?
No, that, everybody's fine.
Okay. You tell me you didn't, Dan, sorry.
No, but it is more for people who are not here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, kind of the rule of thumb is we give handouts to people who attend, because we don't want to lose context of what we're talking about. So, awareness of your top 5, the application, action ideas. I found that as I was putting this together, rereading my own, there's some richness there. And then achievement, they talk about people who have your same theme. And it's not to imply that you got to be doing that type of work. It just kind of gives you an idea of how they describe themselves relative to that theme. So this is a very good handout along with the book. You know, don't hesitate to mark it up. There's way too much in here to remember and absorb, but as you read through it, at least that's how I usually try to remember certain things, I try to highlight what I think is important to me. Okay, this is the first handout. And as they take all 34 themes, they group them into 4 categories, themes, domains: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to circle, I'm going to take time here to read, I'd like you to circle one of those descriptions that you think is the strongest description of you. So take a little bit of time, read each of those, and circle the strongest description of you. I don't want you to look at the blue. I want you to look at everything that's printed in black. Okay, enough time just to circle what you feel is the strongest description of you. In the first column, anybody circle one of those 3 in terms of executing? Which one did you circle?
First one, make things happen.
Making things happen. Okay. Second column, influencing. Anybody circle anything in influencing? Okay. Interesting. Third column, relationship building. Anybody circle anything in relationship building? Just raise your hand. We got a couple of them. Fourth column, strategic thinking. Anybody circle anything there? Ooh, okay, we got a number of these. So all in all, I think we got a cross section of where you fall. The reason I did this, and I'm going to come back to it, is that I want you to look to the back side of that document, and I'd like you to circle your 5 themes, your 5 top themes. And as you do that, I'd like you to flip back to the front side and ask yourself what you circle on the front side, does it align with any of the 5 themes on the back side?
What if you have them all across the board, but they're, most of them are in one of the,
Okay. What's your top theme on the second sheet? When Strength Finders gave you your top 5 themes, what was the top one?
responsibility?
Responsibility. And where's responsibility here?
First column.
And did you circle responsibility on the one side?
No,
You did?
executing now.
What did you circle on the front side?
Strategic, but that's where 3 of them lie.
Okay. Okay.
Like the next.
That's okay. It's just a reaffirmation, one side to the back side. Let's talk about the 5. Let's talk about the top 5 themes. I don't want to take too long on this, but let's. Anybody an achiever? I think you were the first person to tell me that. What does that mean relative to what you've read? Or
It means I like to get things done, and I like to know that I did. So If there's an A, I want the A. If there's a prize, I want the prize.
And your challenge in the interview process is to see if they set goals so that you
Yeah.
can get things done.
Yes, and that's a hard thing for me to conceptualize and express,
Maybe-
so I'm
maybe we
here to
can
get help
you-
with that.
We can help you with some interview questions on that. So I'm just gonna jump around, we don't have time to go through all 34. How about belief? Anybody have belief? Mike, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's a values piece, it's very important.
Mhm,
I can't do what I don't understand,
mhm,
and I can't work with people I can't trust.
mhm. You listen to that. As Mike goes through an interview process, how is he going to uncover that? One more in that column, somebody had responsibility. Right here.
Getting done what you said you did.
Getting done what you said you would do. That is make it a commitment to others. Very much could be a strength of yours that could transfer into a competency. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but following through and doing what you said you would do. So what's unique about you? I'm interviewing you. And so one of the things you would say to somebody, it's been validated here, is I am known, I have a reputation, I have a legacy, is that when I say I will deliver, I will deliver. When I commit to deliver, I will deliver. So you can turn these around and help yourselves in the interview. Let's go to the second column, influencing. Communications. Anybody have communication? I would think, yes. What does that mean to you?
It's really the ability to me, it's the ability to communicate, influence, and relate a story to people.
Okay. So I'm not picking on you tonight, but for everybody, as I keep going through this, I didn't ask this in the beginning, but whatever answers you're giving me,
Excuse me.
the answers you're giving me, make sure they're coming from the book, the definitions of these different themes. All of your answers sound logical and right, but to discipline ourselves, if we're going to use this right, you go to either the printout or the book and understand the definition of that theme. How about in relationship building, adaptability? Anybody have adaptability? Well, I'm not hitting them right, or people are bashful.
Yeah.
You are. What does that mean?
Live in the moment.
Live in the moment. Can I ask you something real quick? In your Myers-Briggs, are you a J or a P? Remember?
No, I don't.
Okay. Living in the moment would be a P. That's me. Go with the flow. Yesterday's history.
Right.
Tomorrow isn't here yet. So going with the flow. So if you were a P in Myers-Briggs, that might validate what you just said. Okay. How about in the third column, empathy? Anybody have empathy? You did? I wonder. So, you can tell me what that means. I'd also like to know, what type of work have you done most recently?
Recently,
Mhm.
volunteer work,
No, okay, that's okay. What about before that?
project management work.
Okay. Customer
In
focus.
IT. No, well, it was in IT, so it was disaster recovery work to make sure, they could recover from a disaster.
Okay. I'm not sure empathy would
Yeah.
resonate with that. But if you're looking for more warm and fuzzies at work, that's your empathy speaking to yourself.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's, again, part of the work culture.
And what's interesting too is that I'm an introvert, but I've been a manager and I like the team because I feel comfortable with the team all together with me. Because, and it's, once I get to know somebody, I'm not an introvert with them, it's the strangers, it's the networking, the new people that I'm really kind of an introvert with.
So let me flip back to Myers-Briggs for just a second. Remember the key word? What's the key word for E or I? It's where we get our energy. Okay? It doesn't have, to me, many people will say the same thing. What Myers and Briggs would say to that is that the E's have this many relationships and that deep. The I's have this many relationships, but that deep. It's that we as human beings cannot survive without a relationship. Every human being needs a relationship around them. Think about that. And one of the horror stories that I recall reading, I think it was in the Korean War, where people were put in solitary confinement, no light at all, for long periods of time. And some of those people had tragic deaths. That's the extreme of saying people need relationships. So the E and the I have nothing to do with people as much as where do we get our energy from. I happen to get my energy around people and actions, and if I describe some of this, the more I get my energy from to you, who is an I, you say, you kidding me? On the other hand, vice versa. And I also would point out that there are CEOs who are I's. Now, when you talk to somebody in a position, say that has to give a presentation in front of people, it goes with the job. If you want that job as a CEO, you're going to have to speak to a board of directors, you're going to have to speak to Wall Street, you're going to have to speak to a government agency, or any one of us speaking to a group inside of a company. But you will, and they'll do it, you and I will do it, the I's will do it. But in working with I's, what they will say is, when I'm done doing it, I'm exhausted. It just takes more energy for the I's to do that. We adapt our behavior for the moment in time to do that. So just remember, it's about where we get our energy from.
And that's probably the problem with interviewing too, is that I'm exhausted afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. It takes a lot of energy to do that. Yeah. We compare ourselves to, say, somebody who's #1 in the sales force. I wish Mo was here tonight to add his insights. But Mo is into heavy-duty selling in key accounts, and it just comes natural to him. It's like this interview is no different than me selling something. So,
I mean, Chad, if I could interrupt.
yeah.
Mo, we used to talk about listening up at my neighborhood, and I walk the dog a lot, and eventually I'll pass his house. He sees me, he'll go running out the door, wanting to start a conversation, wanting to have some interaction. What John says is absolutely true. He's runaway E.
Yeah.
That's because you want money, John.
Yeah.
Let's quickly then go to strategic thinking. Analytical. Anybody have analytical as a theme? What does that mean to you? As you know, so far as you know strength levels.
I like to look into and find all the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, my wife calls me anal. I overanalyze to the point that I keep on doubting myself and re-looking at things. Says you got the right information, pass it along instead of rethinking. And that could be a detriment.
It could be an extreme. You just have to realize when you're comfortable enough with information. On the other hand, I'd probably tell you, probably don't go into marketing.
Yeah.
That just probably wouldn't be a good mix.
No.
But there are a number of analytical type functions, jobs, that you can pick from and that would fit well.
I'm an accountant.
So there you go.
Well,
Interesting.
I'm in marketing and analytical is very important.
Are you in market research?
No, not, I'm in branding.
Branding? Okay.
We have to deal with a lot of facts.
Pardon?
We have to deal with
I was
a
gonna
lot
say,
of facts.
I can identify with that. Maybe I was thinking of marketing in a little bit different way than you're talking, but talk about branding.
So you
Dan's gonna talk
understand
about that.
who your consumer is and what motivates them to buy your product over somebody else's, and why do they buy it at Walmart rather than Walgreens? So it's all these facts that you have to take into consideration when you're designing a marketing program that's gonna reach them with the right message at the right time.
Analytical, I agree with you. It's all about branding. You're right. Input. Tell me what input means to you.
It says, people who have a craving to know more, and they like to collect and archive all kinds of information.
You like to collect information.
So I have a stack of magazines I go through constantly, pulling out the articles I want and filing them. Yep, so guilty as charged.
But you know your Myers-Briggs?
Yeah,
Would it be an NT?
EISTJ.
What is it?
Yeah, it was XSTJ.
STJ, not NTJ. Okay. Sometimes the N-E combination, those middle two preferences, do what you described. They like to collect a lot of information and before they make a decision. Sometimes they don't even use the information. It's just a comfort level that's there. I had two hands. Did you raise your hand?
I did, and the thing that caught my attention is when I go to a big meeting, I tend to sit there and absorb the information. And the piece that I read was that you have to also come up with a workable plan and take what you're learning and put it into action.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I always was like, I'm just gonna suck this information up and then sit in a meeting and be quiet. And it looked like I wasn't necessarily paying attention or wasn't providing because I was just sucking it all up. So I was actively had to figure out how I'm gonna turn around and say, yeah, I've got it all now.
So input, without opening my book, does it speak to providing information or gathering information?
It's about gathering information, collecting information, but then it says at some point you'll need to leverage this knowledge and turn it into action.
And use it. Okay.
Make a point of identifying the facts and data that would be most valuable to us.
In some ways, I think I heard you describe yourself
Yeah.
that way. Thank you. Strategic. What does that mean to you?
So anytime I walk into a company, I can see clearly all their problems. And it's very easy for me to sort of connect all the dots and say, if you were able to do this, this, and this, you'll do things so much better. And yeah, it just, it's kind of weird because other people look at it and they say, I don't see what you see, but to me, it takes me 5 minutes and I can look at an organization and tell them 10 things that are wrong.
What's your Myers-Briggs, your second, what's your preference?
ENFP.
And validates what you just said.
Yeah.
You still remember I said, Covey said, start with the end in mind.
Right.
And so that some people have that theme strength, and it validates maybe going into consulting, being able to look at and analyze and be aware, you're seeing things that people who are your customers don't see. Good story. Thank you. Yes.
Four of my strengths are in strategic, but I don't have strategic as a strength. And what I just had to do tonight, I had a busy day, but I took the test again. I had taken it maybe 4 years ago, and I had exactly the same answers. And this time I was like going much faster because I thought I could finish it and get here reasonably on time. And the order of the strengths from the second taking, even though they're the same ones, was different.
I mean, that's okay, but you say the top 5 strengths were the same. Would you share what your 4 strengths or 5 strengths are in strategic?
Well, one of them is in relationship building, connectedness.
Well, that'd be over in relationship. Okay, got it.
Okay, the others are futuristic ideation, input, and learner.
Okay.
So they're all about absorbing information.
Okay. Say that again. What are the 4 in strategic thinking?
So futuristic, ideation, input, and learner. And they're all very similar because they're all about absorbing information. And the industry I've been in is publishing, where I did work for a software house for a while, but not as a programmer, but things constantly change for me.
So did you have to do research, keep up with the changes?
Yeah, so my process was always changing,
Mhm.
and I kept like an Excel spreadsheet of different projects and the steps to process them, so that 6 months later, when I had to do a similar project, I could just look it up and say, yeah, but the first, I would get files, and the first file might take me, if I was doing a conversion, 20 minutes, and the last file might take me 30 seconds, because I kept on asking questions.
So, as I went around the room tonight, and I say this in a complimentary way, you're not students of the art yet. And I'm going to encourage you to go back and really study your 5 themes. Really study them, because that's really where it's all going to start coming together. It's easy to give a logical definition of a word, which may or not be true in StrengthsFinder. So study the chapter, the 5 chapters that relate to your 5 themes. And that's about as deep as I'm going to go tonight in terms of asking you that it only becomes a strength through repetition and practice. Repetition and practice. And in the book, they talk about the multiple effects. God bless you. So the talent, it's a way of thinking, feeling, or behaving, times or the investment of time that we're going to put in practicing, developing, and building a knowledge base. And that is what then equals what we call a strength. The ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. We are experts in those, say, 4 or 5 themes, and those are our strengths. If those are our strengths, then in a few minutes we're going to start thinking about, are those strengths maybe related to our competencies? Maybe. So everybody with me on that, we'll just fill that in a little bit. The analytical part of this, when claiming what is true, information is confirmed with facts and logical thinking. I spend time, invest my time in my jobs, in my career path. Over time, I've chosen jobs in which I was paid to analyze data, identify patterns, or organize ideas. If I invest that time, then I would identify analytical as a strength of mine. So if you just stop and think a little bit about what you do, if analytical was a strength of mine, how many times has that been evident in the last 10 years in jobs that I've had? Has my strength played out in those jobs in the last 10 years? And by the way, many times this is going to come together. Yeah, analytical fits well in the jobs I've had in the last 10 years. But some of us may say, maybe I was in the wrong job. Because if analytical is a theme of mine and it's not evident at all in a job back there, maybe if you go back and think about the motivators, demotivators, that job probably was a demotivator, and it was a demotivator because it didn't include the analytical strength that you have. So I'm not going to suggest that because you see these 5 strengths that you've perfected over 10 years, that they've already automatically been evident in all the jobs you've had. But going forward, need I say, you want analytical to be, you want that strength to be evident in the next job that you're going to accept. Are we okay with that? Repetition over time. creates a strength from a theme. I know the first time I did this, the title of the book is Strengths Finder. And so I'm reading this and thinking, well, these are my 5 strengths, until I got involved in understanding this a little bit more. So, I'm not certain, I've got a table exercise, and I'm not certain how many people are going to be able to start this. My idea was to use these competencies in the next couple of exercises. So you may have to go home and do this. But the next page that you're looking at, what I'd like you to do, these happen to be my, no, these were a controller. This is the controller's 5 competencies: financial statements, leadership, strategic thinking, policy development, business partner. And again, that's where he got those from doing all the work on competencies in the last session. He identified those 5 as his competencies. And then what we recommend people do is list your 5 themes and ask yourselves, and this is, you can do this right now, if you know your 5 competencies, what theme is most prevalent in a competency for financial statements? And this person here highlighted analytical. You would highlight something else. One of the competencies that he showed was leadership. The same 5 themes, and I didn't mean to do it in this order, if they're coming out in order, but maximizer was a theme that he had that best fit the competency of leadership. Strength. Strategic thinking and planning was a competency, and the theme described as a strength, strategic, was the strength that would best support that competency. Policy development, consistency, and business partner connectedness. What I ask you to do right now, and this may be difficult, because if you didn't bring your competencies with you, it's really hard to do this. And you may have to go home and do this. But identify your top 5 competencies from the last session. And then ask yourself, how do my strengths align with those competencies? Because I'm going to suggest that as you do an analysis of both, strengths are competencies. Competencies are strengths. So we're trying now to bridge the gap here between last session and this session. Does that make sense, what I'm talking about? You identify your 5 competencies. Just identify each of your competencies, and then identify the 5 themes you have, and which of those 5 themes are most prevalent and almost equal to the competency that you know. So we're not going to do this tonight because I have a feeling that we're not ready around the room. Correct me if I'm not reading the room right. Let's take a look at the next page. So, without reading all the verbiage here, the first column talks about the competency, which on the previous page was financial. It's on the back side, I think. No, it isn't. It's a new page. This page said financial statements was a competency, and you see that in the left column. Leadership, strategic planning, policy development, and business partner. Those were the 5 competencies that this, I believe he was a controller, identified. His 5 strengths were analytical, maximizer, strategic, consistency, and connectedness, and that's where he got that from this page. So
Now you,
go ahead.
do I have a question?
Yeah.
You could have more than one strength for each of your competence, or you could have a strength
You could have
listed
3 strengths,
twice.
three strengths for 1 competency.
Okay.
I just tell you, take the strongest
Just because I see that there's only the 5 of them there and for the 5 different competencies.
you know, let's call all 5 somewhat equal. And you take the one that best, the definition that best fits you. As you're doing this, so the competency is financial statements. Look at the top. That's the competency that drives an accomplishment. What I want people to do is go back to your resume and look at your accomplishments on your resume that speak to financial statements. It's got to be there. That's how, in the last session, how we identified financial statements, in this little story I'm sharing, as a competency. Take the accomplishment that best describes financial statements and write a statement. And I just wrote this in, I didn't have a resume in front of me when I did that, but financial statements, I analyze and interpret financial and budgetary reports. That would be prevalent in one's resume as an accomplishment. And I'm keying off the strength of analytical, and then I say at my best when I have well-researched information and numbers to support my logic. Where did I get that from? Right here or right here. Ideas for action. But look at all 3 sections. And what I did is, and this I did by myself, I said, what statement in here best defines for me analytical? And so then I typed that in, and then I compare it to the left-hand column. This is the accomplishment on my resume, analyze and interpret financial and budgetary reports. You know, it's a pretty good match. And so this is starting to show proof that strengths equate to competencies. Strength finders and Tom Rath and people, they won't get into this. We need to get into this because we want to develop a value proposition. We could have ignored all this tonight and just deep dived into the definitions of each of these themes or strengths. But we chose not to do that. As long as you do the homework to understand the theme, then use the richness here and the richness on your resume to complete each of these lines. Leadership, an accomplishment. I select, develop, and evaluate staff to ensure the efficient operation of the function. Maximizer is what in my research, is what I chose as the strongest theme or strength. And I'm at my best when I set a focus for people and then build a sense of team spirit and moving forward. Where did I get that from? I didn't make that up. It came out of here. So it's a matter of having your resume and accomplishments in one hand and having strength finders in another hand to complete this page. It's going to take a little time. You know,
So therefore, if I understand you correctly, you've got your 5 themes that were identified by the strength finders. So then you take those and you put them into the particular categories here. Now, could it potentially be that you're using the same strength on multiple and ignoring one of the things, or could you have 2 on one? So you say you try to take
There you
the
go,
highest
being
one.
analytical, Dylan.
Okay, I failed.
let me answer your question. That's a
Thanks a lot, Pete. I'll see you tomorrow.
Nothing's impossible. That's a possibility. But I think if you just kind of go with the flow of what we're talking about, you'll be able to focus in on one strength relating to a topic.